Welcome to Something in the Wilderness. My name's Steve. Each episode focuses on one particular song that Andrew McMahon has written, produced, recorded, performed, or one of those, or all of those at times. But first, I wanted to mention the upcoming outdoor Andrew McMahon shows real quick. If you haven't heard, Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness scheduled 2 concerts in downtown Detroit this spring. I'm vaccinated, I've been cautious, I only live 3.5 hours from there, and my family and closest friends live nearby there. On one hand, I'm pretty disappointed that the shows have been postponed until June, but Michigan's struggling with their COVID cases, and I fully support any state mandates that keep people safe. Unfortunately, there's still so many unknowns in a new pandemic world, and things have been unpredictable to say the least. With that said, I'll plan to be there in June, masked up, socially distanced, and ready for my first Andrew show in person in years. If these shows do happen, I'd like to record a bonus episode after the concerts to discuss our experiences there. So, if you'll be at one or both of those concerts, and if you want to come on the show and talk about it, shoot me a message on Instagram or Facebook or email and we'll get it set up. You can either be a special guest, or you can just record your thoughts on the show and send it in to me. So with all that said, I want to introduce a song that apparently needs an introduction. A song that Andrew's almost guaranteed not to play in June, or at any show this year for that matter. The song I'm talking about today was written by Andrew, so it's not even one of those Josh songs that he won't perform live. And the lyrics? No, not even one of those lyrically questionable early tunes written by a high school kid. This one has some deep and poetic lyrics, and I think it would be an excellent addition to any live set. But I just feel like the song's flown way under the radar for its entire existence. This is a song that I've never seen on anyone's favorites list, or on anyone's least favorite list for that matter. There's hardly a word about it out on the internet. Andrew never mentions it. Fans don't really talk about it either. But it was on a proper album. To be honest, it's not a song that I seek out separately from his entire album either, though. And I'm not even sure why, but I'll try to delve in and explain my thoughts on this one. Something Corporate's final album came out about 16 months after I saw them at the Warped Tour show in Detroit, so I had plenty of time to sit with the various types of music they had released up until that point. And I put it that way because they were pretty diverse in their sound. I know they were mostly known and still mostly remembered for their many pop-punk leaning hits like If You See Jordan, Punk Rock Princess, and Space, and even other heavy hitters like Hurricane. And they had their share of ballads too. But there was something in between though, this mid-tempo sweet spot they were able to conjure up. Not completely a ballad, not pop-punk. So when they released a new single in the summer of 2003, I'll admit, it sounded like their new album would continue on in the vein of their pop-punk status they'd somehow been labeled with. Their new album wouldn't be quite as diverse as Leaving Through the Window, but it turns out the majority of it definitely fell into that mid-tempo sweet spot I just mentioned. And the sound was somehow new and fresh. I loved this new sound. It's exactly what I wanted from this band at the time, and I still love it today. The song I'm discussing today was one of the more aggressive or heavy songs on the record, actually. Today's episode is dedicated to a very underrated track called Break Myself. The band is Something Corporate. It was track 9 on North, which was released on October 21st, 2003. North was produced by Jim Wirt and co-engineered and co-mixed by Wirt and Phil Caffel. The intent in this recording process was that the band would take a break from the Southern California scene for a bit, to focus without the distractions of their usual daily lives. So, they isolated themselves from anyone and everything they knew by heading north to Seattle in May and June of 2003 at Robert Lang Studios. Now, whether that was the reason for the album title, I'm not sure, but it's my personal best guess. After most of the work was done, they returned home to put the finishing touches on the album at 4th Street Recording in Santa Monica, a place where Andrew still records music to this day. The songwriting was approached a little differently in Something Corporate than a lot of other bands. Instead of all coming together to write songs together, it was 2 primary songwriters. You had Andrew and then Josh Partington. They would each write a set of songs, and then they'd all come together to kind of flesh them out. These 2 didn't always see eye to eye, but they each saw the value in each other's songwriting abilities. So of the 12 songs on North, 8 of them were written by Andrew. One of the heavier and more aggressive songs that he wrote for the album was actually Break Myself. While Andrew handled vocals and piano, Josh Partington and William Tell played guitar, Kevin Clutch Page was on the bass, and Brian Ireland was on the drums. It's actually hard for me to believe that a song like Break Myself was written, performed, and produced by the exact same people who did songs like I Woke Up in a Car and Punk Rock Princess. I feel like the spirit was similar, but the sound was so much more developed and cohesive on this track. not to mention the difference in lyrics, from obvious high school musings to literal poetry. I was surprised and pleased to learn that North did make it on the Billboard Top 200 chart. It premiered on the chart at 24 during the week of November 8, 2003. So here's some albums that ranked higher that week to give you a sense of where pop music was at the time. Limp Bizkit's Results May Vary was at 23, John Mayer's Heavier Things at 22, Beyoncé's Dangerously in Love at 20, Nickelback's The Long Road at 13, Speakerboxx's The Love Below by Outkast at number 4, and at number 1, and this one kind of surprised me, Clay Aiken's Measure of a Man. Then again, he did come in second place on American Idol that year, so I guess it sort of lines up. So I gave you some variety with the choices that I pulled from that list, but I'll link the full list for you in the show notes if you're interested. One other note I want to make about albums that came out around this time is that Elvis Costello released an album of piano ballads, almost exactly 1 month before Something Corporate's North came out. Costello's album was also titled simply North. Now, as far as I know, there's no connection between these albums, and I'm almost 100% certain that neither of these artists knew they were both releasing an album with the same name within a month of each other. And I'm pretty sure Elvis Costello's been in the industry long enough that it probably didn't bother him much anyway. The most interesting thing I know about the song Break Myself is that as far as I can tell, it's never been played live. In fact, I find the lack of live history so hard to believe that I have literally put hours of research into trying to disprove it. What I have found is zero evidence that the song's ever been played live. Can you believe that, though? Now, if you know this song, if you know this album, if you've seen Something Corporate live in concert, even if it's just on YouTube or their DVD, I think you'd expect this song to be in the setlist somewhere. At least I did. There are a lot of great songs on North that work well in concert. I've seen the evidence myself in person. But this song would be a highlight. I went to see Something Corporate when they were touring North just over a year after it came out, in January 2005. So my first thought when doing some digging on this was, they had to have played it live that night. It's one of the most concert-friendly songs on their new album. Nope. They performed 5 songs from North of the 15 total they did that night. Break Myself was nowhere to be found in the set. My second thought on this was, well, then it has to be on the Live at the Ventura DVD, right? I mean, what a perfect song to get the crowd riled up. A nice build in the middle, huge finish. Nope. Break Myself has never been performed live by Jack's Mannequin or Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness either. But why? There are some songs by Something Corporate that, due to the lyrical content written by teenagers, I could sort of understand never hearing them perform live or even referred to in interviews again. But Break Myself doesn't fit the bill for that. It's a great hard rock song with some beautiful piano and lyrics, absolute poetry. On one hand, I would love to ask Andrew about this song, but I have a feeling I'd probably get some standard answer like, oh, there's really no reason. I just don't play it. And I get that there's only time for a few old tunes in the set list nowadays, but the band toured this album for over a year. They didn't even play it live once. I really don't think I'll ever have the answer. But if you want to speculate along with me, or if you have evidence to the contrary, feel free to hit me up and we can speculate together. So according to a post on somethingcorporate.com in August of 2003 promoting North, Andrew described Break Myself in this way. To me, Break Myself is all about total desperation. Just being in that place where you can't do anything to help anyone. What do you do when you're so far away from somebody who needs you and you want to be there but you can't? And in talking about the theme of the overall album, Andrew also stated, it has a lot to do with the effect of being away from people in situations in life that you've never been away from, and how being that far away can make you isolate yourself further. Well, it's easy to guess that the song was written about his relationship with Kelly. They had been dating since the early days of the band, and hadn't yet broken up when this song was written. It could also be assumed that it was a pretty tumultuous time in their relationship, based upon the lyrics. It couldn't have been easy for either of them in that relationship at the time. When Something Corporate went out on tour for Leaving Through the Window, they were so young, and Andrew was gone for an entire year, only to return to have to leave again to go record this album. Andrew was out living this semi-rockstar lifestyle, and I'm not sure how much of that Kelly was actually there for. I'm sure she had her own life to live at home in the meantime. Andrew sounds pretty angry and frustrated in this song, but one thing he makes clear is that he's not giving up on them. He's willing to break himself, put himself through hell, and even bleed to keep them together. I'll come back to some of these lyrics in a bit. But first I want to talk about the sound and the instrumentation in the song. The song fits so well with the rest of the record as a whole. I love the consistent sound across the board. The outro to She Paints Me Blue leads nicely into the intro to Break Myself. It's not a seamless transition, and you can tell they're different songs, but one leads to the next so well. The same thing's done from the ending of Break Myself into the Partington pen ballad, I Won't Make You. But in that one, we go from one of the darkest, angstier songs on the record to one of the most, if not the most, somber, reflective, and compelling on the record. There's definitely more of a break here, a dividing line between them. But the progression between each of the songs, it somehow sounds so natural to me. But I view this entire album as a whole. I see it in 5 parts. I know that sounds odd, but bear with me. I guess it's split up for me like that for a few different reasons. First, I find it really difficult to listen to any one part of this album without listening to the entire thing beginning to end. Every piece of it counts. Every piece has its place. So to get right to the point, 5 parts. I won't go into details about the other songs. I'll save them for future episodes. But first, we have the anthemic opener. Then we have the hard rockin' single. Then we come to track 3, the introduction to what I call the meat of the album. This perfect 8-song arrangement. Before I started this podcast, I don't think I ever listened to these 8 songs apart from each other. Tracks 3 through 10. The somber beginning, the story, the rock anthem, the ups and downs of life, the build, the climax, and the come down and reflection. Break Myself is the crescendo that the rest of the previous tracks have been building toward the entire time. It's a songwriter at his most vulnerable. Once he's finished getting it all out there, track 10 brings the listener back and slows things down for him again. To finish the album, I view tracks 11 and 12 each as their own individual parts, just like the first 2. But let me be clear, I love every song on this album, but for some reason, tracks 3 through 10 have always been the substance of it. Even though my favorite Something Corporate song of all time is on this album, it's not one of those. This arrangement of 8 songs works so well together, and without Break Myself, I don't think it would have the power that it does. Much of that has to do with the songwriting and performance, but at least some of it has to do with the tracking of the album overall. So good job to whoever was responsible for that. With that said, if there were Something Corporate fans craving more of the heavier material that they heard on Leaving Through the Window, Break Myself was one of their answers to their wishes. Though it opens with that stirring piano, you can feel the intensity build from the first notes. I love the production on this song. Even though the guitar is driving most of that sound, along with the distortion throughout, the drums are actually what are most consistent across the board. Also, if you've seen Andrew perform in concert, listen to this song again and try to imagine Andrew absolutely beating on his piano keys during this song. Vocally, Andrew masters the transition between his ballad voice and his rock voice throughout as well. The bridge is where this is the most evident. We come out of the second chorus, one of the heaviest and most aggressive musical pieces on the entire album. He's practically yelling the Never Again lines. Then quiet. I'm willing to break myself. I'm not afraid. As he repeats these lines, the music builds to the climax of the album and goes right back to the aggression, the anger, the pain, the hurt for the final chorus. You can feel it all here. I've wondered on many occasions what it is that I feel like is so special about North to me. And besides what I've already mentioned, another conclusion I've drawn up is how real and raw it is. It's moments like the one I just described that makes it stand out. That bridge and final chorus in Break Myself is just one of the many moments on this record that I almost feel myself seize up for a moment in a fit of emotion. And then it all comes out, just like the music does. It's incredible. What I also really appreciate about songs like Break Myself is that they feel like a full band effort. Every instrument's crucial to the mix. I think that's what's different about the, quote, heavier songs on North compared to the ones on Leaving Through the Window. The instruments here are all working together in a way where the song would feel incomplete if you took away any one of them. Don't get me wrong, I love me some Andrew McMahon ballads, and even some of the heavier guitar songs they've done, but Something Corporate were never better when they sounded this way. And if you don't believe me, just ask Josh Partington. I'll come back to that point. But they sounded like a complete unit, gelling among the instruments, gelling between songs. Some might say a symphony of sound. The song has some pretty powerful lyrics as well. I actually think the lyrics take this song to the next level. There's just so much more to dig into here than what we had heard from the guys lyrically in the past. Some of the most intense and emotional lyrics start the song off. I'm on fire, and the day is feeling hopeless. You'd see me burning, but the burning's turning smokeless. Soon I won't feel it all. Now some might call these lines pretty emo, but I could live with that. The other lyric that really gets to me besides the title line is the bridge. Never again will we fire this gun. No, never again you're the only one. No, never again, but you're already gone. Wow. Fire this gun? You're the only one? You're already gone? Now I'm not sure what he's getting at specifically with the gun reference, but I do know that he feels like he's losing the most important person in his life. And there are several other lines in the song that are beautifully written and really drive his point home. The second part of verse 1, it's electric, the neon hurt inside your phone call, the layered sadness and the madness it revolves, breaking down the walls where you found love. Now these lines are the most poetic in the song in my opinion. I came across a debate among fans on songmeanings.com from about a decade and a half ago, and I'll link that in the show notes. So some argued that Andrew sings the neon heard inside your phone call, which I guess could make just about as much sense as the neon hurt inside your phone call, but the liner notes from my CD went out here, so I'm going with hurt. Some people on that forum also thought he was saying where you found her, but the liner notes clearly state where you found love, so I'll go with that. In the second verse, he sings, and now I'm static. As your sky is turning purple and gray, I'm learning that the further that I crawl, the further that I fall, is that okay? Now here it sounds like he's talking to himself, because he doesn't know exactly how she feels, nor can he control how she feels. Therefore, he's going through this poisoned self-talk. He can't move, he's useless, she's in a darker place, and he can't help her out of it. The more he tries, the worse off it seems to get. And finally, the brilliant chorus. I'm willing to break myself, to shake this hell from everything I touch. I'm willing to bleed for days, my reds and grays, so you don't hurt so much. He's caused her so much pain, maybe from being gone for so long, but he'll do anything to make up for it. He just can't do it right now. I get what he means by I'm willing to bleed for days, but I'm not sure exactly what's meant by my reds and grays. So it was also speculated by fans on that songmeanings.com forum that he was singing more reds than grays. Still don't know what he means there, but the liner notes definitely say my reds and grays. My favorite part of the song has to be after the second chorus, that I'm willing to break myself, I'm not afraid. That build in intensity back up to the final chorus is the climax, the final build in the entire album as I mentioned earlier. I also think the piano intro to the song is something special too, though. As I implied earlier, you can kind of feel where the song is going based on those intense dark opening notes. I'd venture to call those opening notes musical foreshadowing. Of course, there are no other versions of this song out there, not even live versions as I mentioned earlier. So, I'll refer you to the next best thing out on YouTube, and that's a cover of the song. There's this girl Star who apparently was passionate enough about this song to record a cover of it. It's a little bit different, she does it on acoustic guitar, but I'll link it in the show notes and you can see for yourself. If we can't get Andrew to perform this song live, maybe there are some other musician fans out there who want to take a stab at it. Hey, and if you do, hit me up. I'd love to hear from you and listen to your take on it. I've even included a link in the show notes to a tutorial on how to play this song on the piano that another fan put out there. So there you go. You have a start, and you have your homework. Some final thoughts. I was listening to another podcast recently called the Zeitgeist Lab Collection, where they discussed Drive-Thru Records albums from the early 2000s. They had Josh Partington on as a guest, and something he said really stuck out to me, and I'm paraphrasing here. He said that he has no trouble saying aloud that Something Corporate was a really good band, with really talented musicians, especially in that last year and a half or so. He said they were never better than they were for that last part of the band. And I completely agree with him there. The North era of Something Corporate broke them away from that pop-punk bucket they'd inadvertently been dumped into. Even though some of their songs like Break Myself had some killer guitar riffs and hard-hitting drums, spitting vocals, and even the piano was aggressive at times, their sound really evolved into something more melodic, deep, and more mature. I've often wondered what we may have heard from Something Corporate had they made another album, but I have a feeling it would have come closer to something like Me and the Moon and Down than Break Myself. I guess we'll never know. I have to admit here, it was really difficult to talk about just one song on this album. And it's not just how much I love the album and every track on it, but as I described earlier, most of North to me is just one long song with many parts. So to break it apart, no pun intended, felt a little unnatural to me. But I wanted to remain true to the format of this show. This was a little different than the Me and the Moon episode in my opinion, because to me, that song feels like it's grown a life of its own over the years. It's a bit of a fan favorite, it's been played a lot in concert more recently, but Break Myself just feels like one piece of a larger whole body of work. But my final verdict, now that I've given this one a chance on its own, listening over and over again, digging into the lyrics, thinking about how this one differs from the others on North, I rate it pretty highly. It's hard to say it's in the top half of the album for me, but that's just because there's so much gold to mine through here. In the Andrew catalog as a whole, is it a song I'll return to on its own? I think it depends on my mood. If I want more of the heavy, moody side of Andrew, I might lean this way. But mostly, I think it'll continue to be one of those songs in my Something in the Wilderness playlist That's just a pleasant surprise whenever it does crop up again. Thank you all again for listening to this show. I would appreciate it if you'd rate the show on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you're able. And I'm proud to report that we have all 5-star ratings so far, and I thank you for that. Also, post a comment on one of our socials. I'd love to interact more with listeners and hear your opinion on the music I'm talking about here. And if you want to message me directly, email somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com. Take care of each other out there, even if you feel like you're 1,000 miles away.